So good morning and good afternoon and welcome to everyone to this Glow Gut Health Masterclass. I have seen a lot of questions in the Facebook group that I support, as well as obviously a lot of the work that I do with my clients is involved with gut health. And so I thought I'd do a dedicated class on describing what I mean when I talk about gut health and what I mean when I'm talking about gut health from north to south or top down. Because there are a lot of questions as to, what is gut work all about? What are you doing? And how do I know? Do I even need to work on my gut health? And I'm taking probiotics. Does that mean that I still need to work on gut health? So I'm going to hopefully address all of these questions in this class today. So this class is specifically for people who have already done quite a lot of work on changing their diet. So they've maybe done some form of elimination diet, or they've removed a couple of foods and tested that out, but they're definitely on their way to eating a much healthier and an anti-inflammatory diet. So I have provided for the people in my groups and people that are following me a free 7-day clean eating plan. And that is really a baseline anti-inflammatory diet. It is not an advanced elimination diet. So for those who need to go on a more advanced elimination diet, the 30-day reboot program is the more suitable program. But I won't be discussing too much on diet and nutrition today. In the respect that it affects gut health, I will talk about it, but we're not going to go into detail about nutrition. So I have another class called Foods That Harm, Foods That Heal, that talks a little bit more about the kinds of foods that you should be eating. And you can find that on my YouTube channel. All right, so this is also for people who have probably worked with many different practitioners and have made some sort of progress, but still feel like there's still work for them to do. They may even have done some kind of gut work. And that's why I'm going to talk about how the way I work on gut health might be different to other practitioners, as well as, for anybody that might be taking probiotics and taking L-glutamine, because they've read on the internet that this helps with leaky gut. This is also another class for you, because when I talk about top-down gut health, you'll start to understand why probiotics alone is not the solution. Okay. So for those of you who have questions, I will be answering them at the end of the class. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And if you stay till the end, I will be making an offer for those of you who are keen on working with me closer, that I'll make an offer at the end. Okay. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. Let me find. All of a sudden, I cannot find my slide presentation. All right, so before I go on, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mireille Wagner, and I'm a functional medicine and nutrition coach, but I didn't actually start my career there. I started studying when I was in university, finance and mathematics, so I have a very logical mind. I worked in investments for many years, and it was only when I lost a friend to breast cancer about 7 or 8 years ago that I woke up and thought, no, I have a different path in life. I feel like I need to pursue something else. And I started studying nutrition. And what I really was passionate about is supporting people with chronic symptoms and using diet and lifestyle changes to help them reverse their symptoms. So that's what brought me to what I've been doing. And I support mostly people with chronic skin issues, because this is part of my story. I had hives and allergies, hay fever, asthma, eczema. It runs in my family. I thought that there was actually no way around it, because I thought genetically I'm destined to have this for the rest of my life, and didn't even realize that diet and lifestyle was a solution until my friend, when she passed away. I really got a shock, and I decided to start changing my diet. I introduced smoothies. I removed gluten and dairy, and that's when really my health started changing without me even realizing that that was going to happen. And then I was studying nutrition at the same time, and it started to all make sense for me. So I put all these pieces together for the people that I work with. I want everybody to know who's watching this that if you are struggling with chronic symptoms, even though your doctor's telling you there's nothing you can do and all you can do is take medication, there is hope and there is another way. And I've shown this with many of the clients that I've worked with. I've helped many people become hive-free and reverse many of their chronic symptoms like fatigue and pain. And yeah, there are many different things that we can do. So good. And so gut health is a key part of that. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. All right. So for those of you who have followed me for a little bit longer, I do have a class on functional medicine and the functional foundation. So this slide might not be so unfamiliar for those of you who've been following me for a while. I share it with all my clients because it is so foundational. So I won't talk in detail to it because my functional foundations class, which you can find on YouTube, we'll talk about this in more detail. But essentially, all the bubbles that you see at the top is where people are getting lost. They're getting lost in their symptoms, lost in their diagnoses. They go from doctor to doctor and specialist to specialist, trying to address one specific symptom, whether it be a hormone imbalance or whether it be for energy or whether it be something to do with the immune system, their autoimmune diagnosis, etc. So they may be working with many different practitioners. And the way I see it is pulling it together when we look at this middle panel here is these symptoms all come from a breakdown in function. And this is just kind of a description of the kinds of breakdown in function that most people are experiencing, whether it be an inability to detoxify very well, or an inability to digest fats very well, or anything else for that matter, fats and proteins, through low stomach acid or low digestive enzymes, an inability to manage their blood sugars well, or that they're chronically deficient in nutrients. So this is where the function breaks down in the body. And the way to address this breakdown in function is by looking at the pillars or the building blocks that you see at the bottom here. So when I work with clients, these are the areas that I'm focusing on. And when I work with my clients in my gut programs or in my Hive-Free program, for instance, these are the pillars that we are going through every single week, making sure that we have strategies for all of them and constantly aware of what we're doing for each particular block. All right, so as you will see here, diet is a key foundational block, as is hydration, digestion and assimilation, which is the key area of what we're talking about in gut health, as well as elimination, because that's all part of the digestive tract. And then movement and stress response are other areas that we are talking about. All right, so functional medicine, and for those of you who aren't very familiar with functional medicine, functional medicine is different to conventional medicine in that rather than treating symptoms with a pill for the ill, we are trying to understand why a particular person is struggling with a particular symptom. So we try to drive or understand or dig out the root cause for what's driving these symptoms. And it is a very strategic process where we look at trying to unburden the body as much as possible. So we call this the 5 R's of functional medicine. And as you can see here, it is removing, replacing, repairing, re-inoculating, and rebalancing. And I'll go into each of these areas in more detail in the next slides. So the first R, removing, is focusing on taking out everything that could be causing a burden on your body, whether that be toxins or medication, because medications are like it's a chemical in your body, and your body doesn't have a deficiency in medication. It very likely has a deficiency in nutrients, or as I mentioned earlier, a deficiency in function. Things like food sensitivities would be a burden on the body. And that's why when I'm talking about diet and nutrition with my clients, the focus is very much on, are you focusing on removing the foods that are high on the allergen list, not just in terms of allergies, but in terms of food sensitivities. And I have spoken about the difference between food sensitivities, food allergies as well as food intolerances in a different class. So I'm not going to be talking about that in detail, but there is a difference between those three. Stress is a major burden on the body because of its impact on so many different systems in our bodies. For example, when you're stressed, you're not digesting properly. You're not in the rest digest mode, you're in the fight or flight mode. And when we're in a fight or flight mode, the body prioritizes blood sugar. So your blood sugar is going to be increased, your cortisol is going to be increased. And so all of the hormone, this is where hormone imbalances start to set in if you're chronically stressed over a longer period of time. Infections is another kind of burden on the body because naturally, the more your immune system has to be struggling and fighting against infections, the less opportunity it has to start rebuilding in the body. So anything that is starting to add burden to the body, we want to just remove layer by layer. I did speak a little bit about, in advertising for this gut health class is like, what are the kinds of symptoms that you're struggling with and how could they be linked to gut health? And because food sensitivities have such an impact on our gut health, because they start to cause an activation of the immune system, they can directly start causing leaky gut as well, because these undigested food proteins start to appear on the other side of our gut lining, and this is what causes an activation of the immune system. So if you're struggling with any of the symptoms on the right-hand side, just have a look at what's on the left-hand side, because these common food sensitivities can be directly related to very common symptoms that people are experiencing, whether it be headaches, whether it be brain fog, low energy, joint pain even, and that's because of this dynamic called leaky gut. And I'll speak a little bit more about how leaky gut works. So just to the point about food sensitivities, when if you've done my 7-day clean eating plan, it takes out the top 2, gluten and dairy, as well as things we know that are not very supportive of the body, refined sugar, alcohol, and then coffee for a period of time. But if you're doing a more advanced elimination diet, these kinds of other foods, for example, eggs, soy, corn, etc., will also be removed. Okay. Something else that we need to consider removing is toxins, and I've only just put up the slide here as an example of the many different toxins that we're all exposed to on a regular basis. And so rather than trying to hold yourself up and try and not expose yourself, we just need to know, let's figure out where these toxins are in our environment and make sure that at least we're not using them in our daily life, whether they be in our cookware, whether they be in our skin and beauty care, the things we're putting on our bodies every single day, ladies. Read the labels. There are definitely toxins in a lot of the things we're using, whether it be shampoos or creams, etc. If we can just be choosing the cleanest, most organic ingredients, whether it be the food that we're putting in our mouth, the water that we're drinking, the things we're putting on our skin, this is all going to start reducing the burden on our body in form of toxins. Glyphosate, I think we're all exposed to, and that's why the part on detoxification and elimination is so important for us, to make sure that our livers are being well supported through diet and detoxification rituals to help release these toxins that we are being exposed to. So stress, as I mentioned, is a major factor for everyone. I think we're all aware how stress can negatively impact our health. So rather than believing that we can avoid stress, because we're all confronted with stress in many different forms, whether it be emotional stress and being in a job that you hate, or in a relationship that is difficult, or for instance, at the moment I'm grappling with a mom-in-law that has dementia. It's a different kind of stress. And the physical stresses, whether that be the stress of an infection, the stress of having nutrient deficiencies, the stress of having excess toxicities. These are all many different forms of stress, and we need to have a strategy for all of these to be able to reduce stress as much as possible because of its effect on our digestive function, on our hormone imbalance, and the way it suppresses our immune system. So the third R, so that was the remove. Remove as many things that are burning our body as possible. Then the second R is replacing. So this is where the focus on diet and a highly nutrient-dense diet is of key importance, because we are obviously faced with many different convenience foods, processed foods, and it's a really easy thing to do, just to pick something off the shelf rather than start from scratch and cook yourself something healthy. So this is where things really just start to go sideways or downhill if we're not choosing the healthiest foods possible for our bodies. So we're looking for diets that are high in nutrients, phytonutrients, mostly plants. So eat from the rainbow is what I'm always encouraging. We also want to be replacing our digestive secretions, because it's no good, and this is what this class is about, no good just eating the foods. We want to be able to break those foods down with stomach acid and digestive enzymes and bring those nutrients on, because without breaking them down, we're unable to absorb them. Okay. All right, this is just a diagram that I share with all my clients, just to depict the digestive system, because I think most of us, when we talk about gut health and we say, oh, my gut, we're grabbing at our bellies, not thinking that the digestive tract is a very long tube that starts here and ends at our anus. And if we are not cognizant of everywhere the digestive function can break down along this tract, you know, addressing just the intestines with probiotic is not the whole picture. So I always say that to my clients, that digestion starts in the brain, because the moment we start thinking about even eating food, you will even feel that you are starting to secrete salivary enzymes, which is the first step of breaking down carbohydrates. And then chewing, which is the mechanism, the mechanics of the first mechanics of digestion. Chewing is something that I think many of us spend too little time on. I think very seldom we spend 30 chews per bite, whereas we should be aiming towards 50. I think all of us can work better on chewing our food much better, so that when the food does land in our stomach doesn't have such a hard job of trying to break down this food. And if for those of you who have the symptom of feeling tired after meals, it is because your digestive system has to work so hard on breaking down and absorbing this food that you're feeling tired. So that could be one of the key indications, feeling tired after meals, that your digestive function is definitely in need of something. And so when this food that you've chewed lands in your stomach, it will be confronted with stomach acid, which is an area where I think a lot of people are missing. So as I was mentioning, most people, when they're talking about, I'm doing some work on my gut, I'm taking probiotics, and maybe I'm taking L-glutamine because I've read about leaky gut on the internet, and L-glutamine is supposed to help. So that is helping the intestines, but it's not addressing why you might have an imbalance in the gut in the first place. So why do you need to be taking probiotics, and why would you need to be taking L-glutamine in the first place? How did your gut get so imbalanced? And there is, as I've discussed, this process, if you haven't chewed your food properly, if your stomach is not breaking down the food properly because of low stomach acid, what's going to end up in your small intestine is many large particles of undigested food proteins. And this is what starts to ferment and cause what we typically understand as gut symptoms, bloating, indigestion, perhaps reflux, burping, and gas. So that is a clear indication, if you're struggling with these kinds of symptoms, that your digestive function has been impaired. All right. Once the food travels from the stomach into the small intestine, the pH of the food that has been in here sends signals to both the gallbladder and the pancreas to start secreting bile as well as digestive enzymes. So if this pH of the food is not acidic enough, the gallbladder and the pancreas are not going to be receiving that signal. And so you're going to have insufficient bile and insufficient digestive enzymes, which is another chain that has been broken because of poor stomach acid. So can you see how just in those two steps, many things are not necessarily being addressed if you're just taking probiotics. So the small intestine is where we absorb most of the nutrients that we're eating if we have sufficient digestive enzymes. And then once that's been processed and we've absorbed the nutrients, hopefully, it goes into the large intestine where it will be eliminated as stool. And so in the large intestine, the large intestine is absorbing as much hydration as is necessary, etc., and then passing it out as stool. So I'd love to share this slide. This actually comes from a book by an author called Igor Tabrisian, and he's a doctor that has written many books on nutritional medicine. And I just loved sharing this slide because of the way it shows the many different hurdles we have to overcome in order to get nutrition into our cells. And so the first step, I think, we understand that our soils are no longer what they were 50 years ago. If we eat an apple nowadays, it doesn't have the same nutritional value as an apple did have 50 years ago because of the nutrient depletion in our soils of being overfarmed, etc. So that's the first hurdle. And that's why we have to understand that eating just one salad a day, although it may be healthy, is probably not enough to help you reverse any kind of symptom. We need to be eating multiple portions of fruits and veggies per day in order to get our body sufficient micronutrients to help it do its job of repairing and healing itself. So are we making those dietary choices, or are we choosing the convenience foods? Are we choosing salads and vegetables over a croissant and I don't know, a Starbucks coffee, that kind of story? And this is how when I coach clients and talk about nutrition, smoothies is a very large part of it. And this is why it's such a large part of my day, because I know how many nutrients our bodies need. And smoothies are a great way to get many different nutrients in just one meal. And so the area that I've been talking about in digestion and gut health is this hurdle here called absorption. Because as I've described, if we're not chewing our food properly, if we have some kind of maybe traumatic brain injury that has affected the transmission between the gut and the brain, we may not be digesting properly. If we don't have enough stomach acid, we are not breaking down the proteins well. We're not able to cleave B12 and absorb B12. So many of my clients, when I'm looking at blood chemistry, for instance, I'm looking at B12, and usually low B12 is an indication of poor digestion. If you're eating the foods that contain these nutrients, so B12 is mostly found in animal proteins. So if you're not a vegan and you're eating animal proteins, I would expect that you at least have sufficient B12. If I'm not seeing it on your blood work, I'm assuming you're not digesting it and you're not absorbing it. And so this is the key area, how I use blood chemistry to demonstrate to my clients that you're not digesting and absorbing your foods. Things like zinc as well is another nutrient that we primarily get from animal proteins. We can get from plant proteins. And if you are eating these foods, you should be able to have sufficient zinc in the body. And if you're low on zinc, it is very possible that you're not digesting and absorbing. So that hurdle of digestion and absorption is the key area that I'm working on when I'm addressing gut health with my clients. And this last one is primarily an area that I'm focusing on a much more advanced level when I'm looking at hair tissue mineral analysis, because in hair tissue mineral analysis, we are seeing what is getting into the cell, which is hair tissue. And because what we're seeing in the blood is what is available to the body, but it may not be getting across these membrane channels into the cell. And so if I see deficiency in hair, even though you may have it available to you in blood, it might not be getting past these membrane channels. And this is the work I do with more advanced clients on hair tissue mineral analysis and mineral rebalancing. So to summarize, what can you do? As you saw on the functional foundation slide, there are a number of different building blocks that you can be working on to help restore balance in your body. And the primary area and the very first area I would say to work on, if you haven't, is nutrition. So working on a highly anti-inflammatory diet, high nutrient density, good clean fats, good clean proteins, regardless of whether it's plant-based or animal-based, and focusing on as many portions of fruits and veggies per day as possible. Addressing any food sensitivities, and that you can do by doing an elimination diet. You can look at testing. They're not 100% reliable, which is why I don't always recommend food sensitivity tests. And a lot of the clients that come and work with me have already eliminated so many foods that I don't really recommend testing, because only if you're eating the food will it show up on a food sensitivity test. Okay, so if you're eating a varied diet, it might be an easier option to do some food sensitivity testing, but it's not 100% foolproof, and it doesn't take, regardless of what shows up on a food sensitivity test, gluten and dairy are two foods that I do recommend stay out because of the way they impact gut health. There are two proteins that are very difficult to digest for the gut. And when we're speaking about gut health and leaky gut, we have one membrane, one cell thick membrane in our intestinal lining, and that is usually quite tightly regulated just to let the nutrients through. And what happens if we're eating gluten and sometimes dairy, these gaps will open. So gluten does cause these gaps to open, and this is why gluten should stay out, because we're trying to keep these tight junctions tight to avoid our immune system that's sitting on the other side from seeing all of the undigested food proteins on one side and possible pathogens, nasty bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses, etc., that might be traveling through the leaky gut. Okay, so if you're struggling with leaky gut, the kinds of symptoms that you are going to be experiencing are more food sensitivities, because your body is now responding to all of these different foods and saying, no, that undigested piece of broccoli or that undigested piece of spinach, even if it's a healthy food, it can respond to these. Okay, and so you might be experiencing more food sensitivities if you have leaky gut. You might have something like an autoimmune diagnosis, that you definitely have leaky gut, because there the immune system has been activated and it's highly reactive. And leaky gut, as I showed on the other slide, can lead to so many different symptoms, whether it be brain fog, whether it be low energy, slow thyroid, for instance. Those are definitely linked to leaky gut. All right, so the other areas that I mentioned as well in the functional foundations, hydration is critical. Without that, your cells are not going to be able to absorb nutrients either. Only through good hydration can nutrients pass through the cell wall. Toxins are a burden that we need to be eliminating as far as possible, and that's why elimination diets as well as detox and cleanse diets are going to be very useful to help unburden your body in a short space of time and help support your liver. And then the key areas: stress management, sleep. If you're not sleeping well, your body will not be able to regenerate itself. It will not be able to repair its gut, the lining in the gut. And then movement is just something else that supports our bodies in eliminating the toxins, because the more toxins you have in your gut, these are just going to be drilling holes in your intestinal lining. So if you have undigested food proteins, as I mentioned, so an imbalanced gut, if you have toxins, they're all going to be causing inflammation in the gut lining. All right. And then lastly, I didn't speak about testing. It is an option. It is something I used to do with clients a lot in the beginning. But the more I saw test results and the more I saw clients, I felt that... JB, can you just go on to mute, please? Sure. Thank you. Questions towards the end, and then I will address them, okay? So I don't do testing because it is not 100% foolproof. It can also mislead us in that if something does not show up on the test, and we don't treat it or address it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not there, especially in stool tests. I describe to my clients a lot that on stool tests, bacteria and viruses, etc., and parasites, they all live in colonies. And if your sample that you've sent off on your stool test did not take a sample of that colony, it's not going to show up. And so that's why these tests are not 100% foolproof. And even if it doesn't show, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have something present. And so I have a very systematic way of addressing this when we work on gut health, and we do eliminate the most common infections just to support the body as much as possible. Okay. So here we have some time for questions, and I'm going to stop the share in a moment. I thought I had one more slide. Oh, there we go. This is just for everyone who is struggling to make changes. I know it's really easy to stay comfortable in what you've been doing, but if what you've been doing is not working, perhaps addressing just the very simple things like sleep, diet, hydration, exercise, even just starting there can get you moving in the right direction. Non-action is nonsense. So if you have the opportunity to start taking action and having somebody guide you in terms of what is the right action for you now, then by all means, I think take it, because staying stagnant is not going to get you to your goals. Okay. So as I mentioned, I do have an offer if anybody does want to work with me closer. There are two ways that I work with clients. I support mostly people with chronic urticaria, which is hives, and I have a Hive-Free in less than 90 days program that's starting towards the end of April, and that runs for 10 weeks, where we talk about exactly as I've discussed here in the presentation. We talk about diet. Everybody that joins gets the 30-day reboot, which is my primary elimination program. So that's where we work on detoxification and elimination. Then we work on hydration. We work on, as I mentioned, absorption, digestion and absorption, as well as elimination. So this is another key area. I had another client that said to me, oh, actually, it was just a discovery call, and she said, I only have a bowel movement once every 8 days. If you're not pooping, you're not releasing toxins. So pooping once, preferably twice or 3 times a day, depending on how many times you eat, is the ideal. So once every 2 or 3 days is definitely far too slow in eliminating toxins. We talk about stress, we talk about emotional traumas, as well as, working on the other foundations, whether it be sleep and movement, exercise, etc. Okay. All right. For those of you who are not hive sufferers, I will be also presenting at a later stage a gut program for those who may have just autoimmune issues or who are struggling with other symptoms other than hives. But that will probably only be coming up in the next 2 months. So if you are interested, just send me a message and I'll keep you updated as to that.